Roland.
They came together to discuss recent events in North Africa, but inevitably one topic dominated the agenda: Libya. European foreign ministers spoke largely with one voice when they condemned the use of violence against peaceful demonstrators.
I think we're in a situation, for instance, in Libya, where we can only condemn the violence. At the same time, it's not our job to change the leader of Libya. It is the job of the leadership of Libya to listen to its people. And to be quite honest, listening to people doesn't mean that you should be using a machine gun.
We are extremely concerned with events and condemned very clearly the repression that is ongoing. But then we are looking beyond what is happening today. It is a long-term challenge of development, of reform, of economic growth in that entire part of North Africa and Middle East, which will be very high up on the agenda for quite some time to come.
The EU and the United States were criticised for being slow to pick up on the popular mood during the uprisings in Egypt and Tunisia. This time they are moving swiftly to demand an end to the bloodshed in Libya.
But Europe is also dependent on Libya. Italy gets 1/5 of its oil from Libyan wells, and Libyan cooperation is vital to combat illegal immigration into Europe.
This may explain why the Italians have struck a slightly different note from their other European partners.
I'm extremely concerned about the self-proclamation of the so-called Islamic Emirate of Benghazi. Would you imagine to have an Islamic Arab Emirates at the borders of Europe? This would be a really serious threat.
The Spanish foreign minister has spoken of evacuation plans for all EU citizens. And Britain has called on Libya to protect foreign nationals. But right now, Libya does not seem in the mood to listen to European demands or warnings. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's talk to Jackie live from Brussels now. Jackie, we heard plenty of words of condemnation from various foreign ministers across Europe. But just how united is the response from Europe to those events in Libya? Just how coordinated is it?
I'd say that there is a broad consensus within the European Union that this is completely unacceptable, and they will use all diplomatic pressure that they can bring to bear. However, you'll have also already heard in my report that slight different note struck by the Italians because of the particularly close relationship between Italy and Libya. Not only the fuel which Italy gets from Libya, in fact, Italy is, of all of the countries to which Libya exports oil, Italy is the one who is taking the largest proportion of its national needs from Libyan oil fields. But also, of course, the question of immigration. Italy feels first and most strongly the effects of illegal immigration from Africa. The Italian island of Lampedusa in the Mediterranean, very close to the Tunisian and Libyan coasts. So if there is going to be an increase of illegal immigration from North Africa, it will be the Italians who feel the effects first. And we shouldn't forget either the personal friendship between Silvio Berlusconi and Muammar Gaddafi. In fact, Berlusconi actually said about 24 hours ago that he didn't want to bother Colonel Gaddafi at this particular time. So clearly the Italians do have a distinct stand as opposed to the rest of Europe, but broadly they would also agree with the need to deal with these issues with dialogue rather than with violence.
I mean, Jackie, there has obviously long been concern about human rights issues in Libya, and many European countries have expressed that. But is it fair to say they've had a bit of a balancing act to do to balance up those human rights aspects with the fact that many parts of the EU do rely on Libya for oil, and there is this issue of immigration as well?
Yes, well, what we're looking at here is realpolitik, certainly European values of human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. These are the rights that are being underscored and reiterated in this meeting in Brussels now. However, the reality is big economic interests at stake. A huge BP, British Petroleum, contract in Libya, sales of Airbus aircraft to Libya, defence contracts, even cooperation in the sphere of nuclear energy, as well as the whole issue of immigration immigration that we were talking about just a moment ago. Yes, Europe has a lot of interest in Libya, which is why I think we may see the Europeans walking something of a tightrope. That said, up until now, they don't seem willing to bow to what amounts to Libyan blackmail. The Libyans are actually threatening to suspend all cooperation on the fight against illegal immigration if the Europeans essentially don't just shut up. And one European official, in fact, it was the German foreign minister who said that Europe would not be blackmailed by Libya. And other officials have also said that there are certain European values that they are going to continue to reiterate, regardless of what threats or what pressure Libya might try to exert in return.
All right, Jackie Rowland live there in Brussels. Jackie was talking a little bit about Italy a moment ago. Let's take you from Brussels to Italy. And there have been protests taking place outside the Libyan embassy in the Italian capital, Rome. As you can see, Harry Smith is there for us now. Harry, tell us a little bit more about what's been going on.
Well, as you heard from Jackie, the reaction from Italy has been different from many other countries in the European Union, surprisingly, because in a way Italy is closest to Libya, not just geographically but historically. It's the old colonial power. But what we have seen today is a demonstration outside the Libyan embassy in Rome. There have been demonstrations outside Libyan embassies throughout Europe. This is the first day that they've demonstrated in this fashion outside the embassy in Rome. Surprising in a way, because Italy has a large Libyan expatriate population. What they're protesting about is that they simply say that they've had enough of Colonel Gaddafi. The scenes that they've witnessed on television stations like AlJazeera are too shocking for them to agree to support this country anymore. Let's just listen into one of the protesters that we spoke to earlier.
We would like, the West to understand that we sell you the oil, but we don't want you to support any regime which is against ours.
Just one of the protesters there speaking to us a little earlier. Harry Smith in Rome for the moment. Thanks very much indeed for that. And I'm going to be back a little later on with more reaction from Europe. But right now, let's head back to Doha and rejoin Shuli. Shuli.
Felicity, thanks very much indeed for that. Let's discuss the situation in Libya further with Salman Sheikh, who's director of the Brookings Centre here in Doha, and I'm pleased to say with me in the studio. Now, a little earlier on, we were reporting that Ali Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader, was blaming US foreign policy for what's happening across the region and in Libya. So let's talk about US foreign policy. Is there a link between how it has treated the Gaddafi regime? Because there has clearly been no love lost between the two countries for years.
This is a complicated issue. First of all, Khamenei cannot really claim the effects in terms of US foreign policy on this particular.
But it is fair to say that US foreign policy was blamed for the entrenching of the Egyptian regime, for example. But yes, Libya is a very different situation.
Yes. What has been clear is that the Americans, even in the past week, have not come out more clearly and more strongly in terms of the kind of actions that are required of the Libyan regime. Even on Friday, we were still getting just 3-line statements from President Obama. Now, on Sunday, after more than 500 people killed, I think, in Benghazi and other centers, we have now had the State Department spokesman come out and condemn the use of violence on the peaceful protesters. But I would say the question now is not only for